Hello, I'm delighted to welcome you to a Fireside chat with Vinoy Kumar, Global Head of Digital Assets at Standard Chartered Bank. During this session, we're going to unpack what it means for one of the largest banks in the world with 85,000 employees to be a significant entrant into the digital asset space. But first, if I may introduce Vinoy, who runs SAB's Digital Asset Center of Excellence. Vinoy joined the bank in 2014 as a partner from Boston Consulting Group and is a strong advocate for tech and innovation and has been an investor and advisor to multiple startups. Vinoy, a warm welcome. I'm very glad to have you here today.
Hey, Kenny, thanks for inviting. I'm looking forward to this conversation. And don't ask me too tough questions.
All right, I'll keep it light. I'll keep it light. So maybe what we could do is perhaps start with what is the Digital Asset Center of Excellence, and maybe perhaps you can reveal to the audience some of your grand plans for the crypto asset class at Standard Chartered.
Yeah, so I think it's a great place to start. So if you look at the way we think about digital assets, and which is a broad range of cryptocurrencies, tokens, CBDCs, all of that encompassing, we believe that it is fundamentally going to transform financial services landscape, and it will impact every aspect of it and cut across businesses, right? Several of the business models, et cetera, will cut across businesses. So we have set up a small team which covers the corporate institutional bank, consumer bank, as well as SC Ventures. And it does three or four things, or five to be precise. One is just bring together the narrative for the group of what we're doing in digital assets. The second is, depending on what initiatives we are running across the bank, supports to different levels required. The third is we also engage with policy makers as well as regulators on bank's position on various topics. Fourth is, this topic is not about one person knowing in the bank. It's not about five. It's the bank needs to understand if we truly believe it's transformative. So it's about engaging the organization, building capabilities. And last but not the least, as we all know, there's a huge amount of regulatory scrutiny on this. Right? So there's a little bit of a role in the governance of digital assets in the group as well. So those are the five roles we do. I mean, if I move to the next part of your question, if we think about digital assets, we would think along three vectors. Start with a client-centric. I mean, you have to be thinking client first. So you can say the institutional or individual, and you can subsegment it in different ways, etc. But take that vector. The second is different types of digital assets. So like I said, you could say Bitcoin, Ethereum, which is crypto assets. You could call what we call, you could take tokens, you could take CBDCs, you can take stable coins, all of that universe. So there are different types of this. The third is activities. So trading, risk management, custody, tokenization. So there are different activities, right? And as we know, all of these are not going to evolve at the same pace. And being a regulated and authorized entity, or otherwise as well. I mean, culturally, we would want to operate in risk managed and regulatory compliant manner. So what it means is that we are, and the pace at which things are changing, right? So we are quite mindful that we have to be adaptive and flexible, and we have to cover a broad range. Being a universal bank and having clients and activities, quite a broad range of it, we have to be broad-based, but we have to be targeted as well in terms of what we pick and choose. And that's why if you look at it, it's in public news. We have institutional grade custody for digital assets, which is live now. And with your parent entity, we have a joint venture, which is around brokerage and exchange for UK and Europe. So and these are some things we can talk about, and there's plenty under the hood as well. So yeah, we look at it in a more holistic manner.
That's fantastic. Perhaps what we could do is let's focus on the key value proposition for clients who are holding crypto today. Why should they access crypto from a bank where they're already being serviced from existing crypto native platforms who have actually, to be honest, have a multi-year head start?
Yeah, it's a great point, and we often get asked that question as to what is our advantage, and why should clients come to the banks? I think there's several reasons. One is if you look at this world, or the e-commerce or the global economy or financial systems is not going to have a binary outcome. It's not going to be all digital assets and no fiat, or vice versa. We already crossed that hurdle. So, and what many of the clients are looking for is a seamless integration of the two worlds, and ability to move across the two worlds, and ability to merge their existing financial interactions or combine the financial interactions in a manner in which it is simple, and they can reconcile the two. And that's that. And the banks have a huge role to play in that. The second thing which is there is the clients are also looking for a trusted relationship and risk managed and regulatory compliant outcomes, because that gives them certainty, that gives them confidence, and that's again something where banks have a huge role to play. So, I would say that they're quite. If you're looking from a longer term perspective and for the growth of digital assets, the banks and traditional financial institutions, regulated world, has a huge role to play, and we see it that way.
Tend to agree. So maybe perhaps you could share with us maybe what the key success factors you think for wider adoption and the role of crypto education into our growth strategy. Part of what we do in this conference is also education. I'd love to hear what are some of the big bets that you have at SEB.
Yeah, so Matt and you and I were talking backstage just now, and education is very important for this, because I believe demystification is an important aspect of it. There are quite a few people who get scared that this is a world they don't understand or they don't know how to engage with. So I think that is a barrier or hurdle which needs to be addressed. And and in some, and the level of education or what we can provide varies depending on whether it's a high net worth individual or it is an institutional client, because I think everyone is learning. It's evolving at such a fast pace that everyone is learning. That is number one. The second thing which I would say is, to my earlier point, the integration with the traditional finance world will make life much easier. And that brings me back to why the banks or regulated institutions have a role to play here in terms of adoption as well. And then if you look at a regulatory perimeter getting defined, will give that certainty as well. Because if in some ways people are scared as to where it'll go, and a lot of volatility has to do with it every time there's a regulatory question mark, or there is a market conduct type of event in this, right? So I think that is something which will help. If you look at from our perspective, we don't see a silver bullet type of approach, because if you look at it, it is much more, it is something which is going to spread across and it is cut across. So you start, it's much more going to be in phasing as to where you start and where you go. So that's why, again, the custody and the brokerage and exchange kind of a proposition, risk management, there, simple trading, enabling trading across the client segments is something which is there. And also we have to the point I was making earlier, the world will go in different directions. To my point about diversifying the bets, I mean, if you look at something like China, its pilot is in 10 cities next year. By next year, CBDCs, China ECNY is going to be live nationwide before the Winter Olympics. If you're an operating bank, you have to factor that in. If you're a client, you have to factor that in. Yep. And similarly, if you look at all the perimeters which are getting defined around stablecoins, regulatory perimeters, etc., direction of travel is that, yeah, there is a little bit of uncertainty, but in terms of what the outcome of that is going to be, but it's moving towards a more regulatory clarity. And regulatory clarity is going to give it a space to grow, in which to grow. And so I would say that if you take the CBDCs and if you take the stable coins world, on-ramp, off-ramp starts getting easier, right? And some of the payment rail friction costs which we have or inefficiency we have start getting addressed in specific markets or wherever it is possible. So we will see a pace of evolution picking up in many ways. So I think we have to be open to that. If I look at the word DeFi, we talk about DeFi and everyone says, okay, what's the regulatory play here? Is this really economic value add and so on and so forth? My hunch is regulated and authorized entities, etc., will have a play. And they will try and participate and figure out as to how do you engage in a DeFi world pretty soon. So I mean, I think so there is a bunch of things
Yeah. So speaking of CBDCs, SC Ventures Liberty was a finalist at the MAS's Global CBDC Challenge,
Yeah.
creating more use cases for adoption of CBDCs, such as bond distribution. Do you see this as another big bet?
CBDC is a necessity. If it's getting because if you look at for us, because if it's a central bank issued, it's a legal tender. You and if you accept digital payments, etc., you have to deal with it. I think the question is when and how and which markets, etc. It starts popping up. So, like I gave an example of China. On the other hand, you have Nigeria, which is going live of this month sometime. It was supposed to go live on 1st of October, but it's going live sometime this month with CBDCs, and which could be mandatory for all banks who operate in the country. So the way we see this is actually, if you look at CBDCs, is an important part of being a bank, and for us to deal with it. And if and what it starts doing is it makes the payments and value-added services around the payments or payment-led business models start becoming that much more reality. And programmability is the one aspect which we have to really pay close attention to for all the digital currencies, including the CBDCs.
Sure, sure. As a general imagine, just getting a large financial institution into crypto relatively early is no easy feat. Maybe perhaps you can share with us some of the journey that you've taken to get one of the world's largest banks to be significantly involved into this new asset class.
It's a journey. We're still on the journey. That probably we are a bit ahead than some others, and we are taking a view that it is quite important for our clients and quite important for our business in future. But as I was saying to Matt earlier, I don't think that's a reason for us to rest. We haven't gotten there. This space is moving too quickly, and will continue to do so. I think there are a few things which are important. One is, I've always said this, is that no organization or no individual is going to learn by sitting on the sidelines. You have to engage, yeah, and you have to engage, and that's how you learn. And there is no good time to start. So we're very lucky that there are a few passionate people or groups of people who really took upon themselves to take us or drag us into this world. Yeah, and if you look at from that point of view, the culture of the bank now is quite helpful in that, because there's a innovation and digital is core part of the DNA now in the bank, and you can see it from the SC Ventures. You can see the number of ventures which are coming out of the Standard Chartered. You can see the number of digital banks which are popping up in different geographies. So so I think there is a cultural element of that as well, and importantly, there is a huge amount of leadership support to go and experiment and drive this. So those are my key messages. If you look at from an organizational change perspective, it's not going to happen overnight. You can't wait for things to be perfect and everything to be regulated and certain outcomes. There's always going to be a frontier which is going to push the boundaries. So you have to be in it to learn it. And the leadership, support, culture of the organization matters. And in some ways, this is a change which can help you drive that cultural shift in organizations.
Yeah, a lot of wisdom there. I hope the other banks are taking notes. So maybe let's should focus a little bit. I wanted to share with you an article from Bloomberg, where Jump Trading announced or promoted a 25-year-old former intern to its head of crypto. And what he said was the marching orders from his bosses were pretty simple. Make sure we're positioned in the next 5 years to be a really big player in an industry we think is going to be enormous. So what is your message to rising stars or even interns at SEB today who are thinking about a career in crypto?
Yeah, it's a very thought-provoking question, right? And I think it doesn't matter whether you're young or old. If you think you're gonna be in financial services or in commerce or in a business of any type, in 5 to 10 years' time, I think one needs to recognize the change which is underway. And if you dream about driving or shaping the world and financial services and driving innovation of some form or the other, you have to get on and on this topic. This is the opportunity to shape things. This is the opportunity to engage and give be one of the, I would say, shakers and movers of the future, which is going to come. The future is not going to look like what we see today or what we saw 5 years back. It will not even look like what we'll see next year. It will look very, very different. Once you put together the digital currencies, tokenizations, NFTs, you could say that ultimately everything will exist, even your property rights and everything else will exist in a coin format. You're just going to be trading coins. Who knows?
Yeah, I totally agree. I still think we're in the early innings of crypto. And the people who ask me, I say the same thing. It's not too late. Actually, we're still in the early innings. You also mentioned something about never being able to rest. I want to find out what keeps you up at night and what's the biggest challenge that you see in the space. Do you see it being market competition? Do you see it as increasing regulations or perhaps a rug pull?
Yeah, it's interesting. Often the regulatory change and scrutiny is spoken about as an area of concern or is something which could be disruptive. I think that is a positive because the more clarity you have, the more certainty you have, it'll make it easier for everyone to engage, and that's what we'll see. Right. So I see that as very, very positive. Competition, yes. I mean, if you look at Singapore, someone was throwing a number that there were 85 exchanges or something else popping up in Singapore. It's okay. I think this is not at this stage competition. That is a worrying factor. This is the time. What I call this is a collaborative competition because actually the activity grows the space. So competition is welcome. This is not going to shrink the pie. This is going to grow the pie. And I would say what keeps me awake or what is the pace of change and the activity which is there and the amount of change that you need to drive through the existing business to catch up or keep pace with that change. Yeah. So that is one. The second thing which is there is I always say is it's about technology, but it's not about technology. Because it's very easy to build platforms. Excuse me. It's very easy to build platforms. It's really, really hard to get clients on it. And that's where the challenge, I would say, sits for many of the new businesses. And I heard quite a few pitches today. I would say that's where the challenge sits.
Yeah, agree. Client acquisition is a huge friction here. And also, I guess, the same way, the pace of change is refreshing and challenging at the same time. I mean, sometimes I wake up and I find that the crypto market is all about JPEGs of bored-looking apes or pixelated punks. What do you do to stay ahead of the curve? Are you on Twitter? How do you stay connected to sort of the latest developments in crypto?
It's very hard. There's always something which has happened, which is you've missed. So you have to be realistic. But I think at the same time, I would say keep pace like you do. Whenever you have a chance, you see what's published, who's done what, and some of the tracking, etc. helps. But most importantly, you have to keep talking to people who are actually doing things. And that way we are lucky because we get to see lots of new businesses. We get to hear lots of ideas. Like you said, we have 85,000 people. And as the excitement builds, we are starting to see lots and lots of idea flows. And we talk to potential partners, people who are trying to drive business, grow their business. So I think that is what is important. You have to that's how you do. You have to be out there and talk to people because this is moving pretty fast.
Yeah. Whether it's virtually or physically, I think, staying abreast of what's happening is very important. And I was just saying to you earlier, in Singapore here, it's a very tight-knit, close community of people that are in crypto. So always exchanging information. I find that everyone's very, very open. And you're right, we're not competing at this point. We're actually looking to grow that pie. So yeah. In the same way, growing that pie, we have a few minutes left. So I want to end off with maybe a few bold predictions for 2022. Do you think we'll see SEB offer some DeFi staking, maybe buy your own NFT, or maybe open a branch in the metaverse? What's your grand vision for 2022?
I would love to. You seem to be better at predicting than I am.
I thought about this, yes.
But let me see if I think that 2 or 3 things which will matter or which will be quite relevant to all of us. And these are mine, right? So take it with a pinch of salt. I'm sure you have better ones, and others in the room will have even better ones. So one is, I would say, some sort of a regulatory perimeter around the cryptocurrency, crypto assets getting defined in some market, which will start giving it some certainty. And I don't mean the way El Salvador doing its currency. I mean, I think that's one way to do it, but I think it's a better. We'll see some better operating format emerging, given the amount of attention it is getting. So that is number one. The number two, interestingly, I think we talk about the exponential growth of stable coins. I have a feeling CBDCs market cap, if there is such a thing, would exceed stable coins this year, 2020.
Okay.
Which tells you about the countries which might get involved in that. So that will happen. The third, I think, is if you look at the growth trajectory of DeFi, to your earlier point, I think DeFi will cross $1 trillion in terms of market cap. It's quite 2022 could very well prove to be that year when it crosses that, and I think that goes hand in hand with what I was saying earlier. Is that will force a lot of us to look at ways of participating, because if you think about DeFi, whether it's a regulated or not regulated, etc., but there are some very, very interesting P2P models, governance models, etc., which sit inside, which can be taken out and applied in other context. And I think we'll see some of that more in institutional DeFi model.
Okay, great. Oh, wow, some grand visions there. So yeah, CBDCs taking off. Okay, well, hopefully, next time we'll get you on. We'll get you on with an NFT in your hand.
Yes.
So we just about time. So a sincere thank you from OSL for joining us on this panel.
Thank you for inviting me. Yep.
Thanks, Vinoy.